Let's start with this. Usually on this show, I'm interviewing city council people in San Antonio, Austin, Dallas. Of course, you represent Portland, Maine. I would love to hear about your journey to elected office in Portland, Maine.
Yeah, I have an interesting journey to city council because I did not have any interest of being a city councilor. I always say it was never on my vision board. I never aspired to be in politics. Um, and prior to joining city council, I was a community advocate and a community leader here in Portland. So I was involved in a lot of like sessions about how to get people involved in local politics and how to get people to go to meetings, give public comment, engage with your councilors and your representatives. And then when we had a lot of Black Lives Matter protests, I think that's when I really started to take on a larger role of just trying to advocate towards what we need in terms of systemic change in and out of local government. So I was definitely somebody that didn't want to be in politics. I actually really liked the grassroots space that I was in. I liked the community advocacy space that I was in. But when the seat opened up in my district, a lot of people were asking if I was going to run, and I gave them the same answer every time, which was absolutely not. I was like, that sounds terrible. And I realized I also had to take the advice I would have given somebody else, which is, you know, yes, maybe you don't have any political experience, but you have lived experience and you should be in there as much as anybody else. And I realized that that was the advice I had to take for myself, which is what I would have told other people. So I decided to run and get involved in politics for the first time. And I definitely was, as they like to call me, a political newcomer. So everything was very new and very interesting, but it ended up being successful and I won my election.
So every article, while doing my research, every article I've read about you on council refers to you as a progressive. What do you think it means to be a progressive in local government?
And, it's really funny when people say it's like the progressive counselor. I mean, I am, but it's also like if progressive means that I care about historically disenfranchised people who have always been under-resourced, who have always been underlooked, who have always been marginalized, then I guess that makes me progressive. But to me, that's just being a human that cares about other people, especially people that have never been seen and have never been provided for in the way that they should be. So I don't know. I think people try and use like the progressive leftist terms for me, which really I think just means like young and Black and talks a lot. I think that that's kind of like what people mean when they're like, oh, she's just a progressive counselor. But yeah, I mean, I really advocate hard for systemic change. I bring up race very often because I think that we have a significant amount of racial issues that are happening here in Portland and everywhere all over the country. And I think it's really important for people, especially younger people, to be able to speak up in these spaces. And it's a huge privilege to be able to be on city council and do that. And so it's my job to really advocate for the people who aren't able to advocate for themselves.
I read in one article that during your first city council run, while you were running for office, you were actually kind of struggling to pay rent. As someone myself who has a long history of struggling to pay rent, I wonder if you could speak to some of the structural challenges for working class people running for office.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. It's unbelievable. It's and that was what was so funny about the election and politics in general. It's like we have all these people talking about like affordable housing and what do we do? And all of these people are taking these meetings from like $1 million homes and never like when's the last time you were worried about paying rent? When was the last time that you were actually like, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm going to make it this month? So I think in terms of like working class people running for office, it's actually very unaccessible because we have a large majority of people who are working class who aren't working like the traditional 9 to 5 hours or like working in service industry. They're working in like a more creative environment or they're working nights. And so a lot of times, a lot of the debates that we would have would start at 5 or 6 at night. And for a lot of people working class, that's when they're starting their work hours. The meetings are Mondays at 5:30. Again, that's a heavy work hour for a lot of people who are working service industry jobs or just working jobs that aren't traditional corporate environments. And we would get so many questionnaires sent to us as well when we were campaigning from all of these different groups all around Portland, like 20 questionnaires saying like, this needs to be due in 5 days, or this needs to be due in 3 days, not taking into consideration we're working, we're also trying to campaign. And that even happens now. Like I'll get calls and emails all day on like super urgent stuff. And I'm working during the day. Like I have a full-time job. We don't get paid a living wage. And I need to work in order to support myself living in this city so that I can be your counselor. And so it gets really tough. And it's just the way it's set up and the way it's designed is for people that are retired, people that are older, that can do this as a hobby. And because of that, we have such a lack of like younger people and people of color who are able to access these seats because it's just not by design made for us. And the people that are really going to make the most positive change, like the young renters, service industry workers, they're just not able to access City Hall because it's not designed for them to access. So running as a working class person, and like we could dive into that so much more because like campaigns are super expensive and it's like there's no money coming in. I was like doing $5 Fridays to ask for donations because I know people don't have any money. Like no one has money to just like throw at a campaign. So it's tough to run as a working class person, and you really have to be careful and use your money and your time well to be able to put your name out there. Especially when there are some larger names in the race who are 30 years older than you and retired. So it's tough.
I wonder if that's kind of nerve wracking. You said the larger names in the race that might be older than you. Just being a young person, somebody that's not independently wealthy, like doing stuff like door knocking, printing stuff with your face on it. I wonder just like how nerve wracking of an experience that is.
Well, I hated canvassing. That was the worst part of the campaign. I'd never done it before. I honestly never want to do it again. It was terrible because when you're on somebody's doorstep, especially when you're a younger person, especially when you're Black, especially when you're a woman, people have this thing when you're on their doorstep of like, I need to exert power over you. So like I've had doors slammed in my face. I had people crumple up my canvassing palm card and like throw it at me. Like people were treating me terribly when I was going canvassing by myself. So then I started, which of course I'm talking to like other Black women who had done this before. And they're like, you're going alone? They're like, don't go alone. And I was like, I didn't know. I thought I could go by myself. So after that, I would start canvassing with like a buddy or two, which made it a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, that was intimidating in terms of just showing up and having to advocate for myself and having people look down at me and be like, what are you doing here? That was really hard. My opponent was somebody who had a name. He was a former city councilor, a former state rep. He was significantly like 30 years older than me, definitely just like a person that a lot of people knew. And so that I think was challenging because I was totally new. Like people in grassroots spaces knew me, which I think helped a lot. But in like the political establishment, I was not known. And a lot of people would just sum me up as like, oh, it would be like former counselor and state rep versus an activist. And that's how they would like write it in the paper. So it was hard. It was definitely a significant curve and a hill that I had to climb to really put my name out there, especially when I'm running against somebody that's so well known.
And of course, local governments across the country, face a range of different issues. I'm down here in San Antonio. We're dealing with a heat wave. That's something you probably never have to deal with in Portland. I wonder what what some of the big issues facing your community in Portland are right now.
We do get a couple hot days. We've had the worst June ever. It's been raining for, I don't even know, like 20 straight days, but we would love a heat wave, I think, at this point. But I mean, ours for Portland right now is definitely our unhoused community and our asylum seeker community. So we have a significant amount of asylum seekers here in Portland. We have a significant amount of unhoused community members in Portland. There are encampments that are starting to grow because we have a housing crisis. Nobody can afford to live here. Nobody can find a place to live. Our shelters are at capacity, and we are working with resources just stretched super thin. So that's the biggest pressing issue that I think we get the most emails about right now are encampments, unhoused individuals, asylum seekers. Where is everybody going to go? We have people sleeping on the streets and in parks, and I'm looking at that through the lens of they don't have anywhere to go because the city is very affordable. Where do you want them to go? But other people are looking at this through the lens of my city is falling apart. Portland is becoming unsafe. We have people sleeping outside. So it's like a balancing act that comes from like a very privileged perspective to a perspective of looking at this as like a human rights issue where everybody deserves shelter. Everybody deserves a bathroom and a shower and a place to call their own. And we're having definitely like a tug of war, I think, between people who just want unhoused people to not exist in their city and people like me and other younger kind of activists who are saying this is speaking to a systemic problem that Portland is unaffordable and not inclusive. And so what are we going to do to make sure that we're supporting these individuals? So it's interesting because like when you think about Portland, you would think like, I mean, this is an issue too. Like our sea levels are rising. We're right on the water. Climate change is happening. Of course, huge issue. And like we've had some significant racial issues as well. We had 30 Nazis come to the city in April and terrorize a bunch of people. Like we have really significant big city problems for a small city. But right now, the biggest glaring issue is just where is everybody going to live? How do we make sure people can be safe? And what are we going to do to try and shelter as many people as we can?
I imagine that most people, most voters, most activists in Portland probably consider themselves progressive or more liberal minded. I wonder if that's interesting to see people that, ostensibly refer to themselves as more progressive, maybe falling on the other side of the debate about asylum seekers, seeing people that, in name are progressive, but don't
Mhm.
support the asylum seekers in your community. Have you seen that at all?
Oh, all the time, all the time. Yeah, I got some emails the other day that were very similar to that. And it's always like, I'm progressive, but I'm like, okay, here we go. Can't wait to read this. But I think, and I get, I mean, it's tough. It's tough for people. They want to be progressive, but people are starting to feel unsafe. I certainly never want anybody to feel unsafe in Portland, period. But I also think that we are walking a really fine line between supporting individuals and like demonizing individuals. And it's like a very, very thin line where it can fall one way or another because we'll get emails saying like, yes, I want to support people, but maybe we should be supporting American citizens first. And like, they don't think that there's anything wrong with saying that sentence. And to me, when I read that sentence, it's like, let's not help the asylum seekers. Let's help the white unhoused individuals that live here. And like, that's a huge problem. But people really think that like that's an okay thing to say just based on their lens. So I think a lot of it too is just what I'm trying to do is be able to have dialogues with people who just have different lenses on this issue than I do. I'm somebody where I'm like, we're helping every single person, but also like we have to look at being marginalized and like significant lack of resources that like our asylum seekers have. Like they can't work for the first, I don't even know how many days they get in here. That's like a federal thing versus the unhoused community members that are here. So there's a lot. And what I don't want to happen is I don't want these people to separate these two groups and then make them kind of start hating each other and saying like, we're going to help one and not the other. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, there are definitely very progressive people who are like, I'm progressive to a point, but when I look out my window, I don't want to see a tent. And that's a tough conversation to have because again, I go back to, I don't know where you want them to go. We don't have any, the shelters are full. We have no housing. I don't know where you want them to go. I'm sure that they would love to be in a nice house with a cozy bed, but that's not a realistic option for them right now. So some tough conversations for sure all around on that.
And I did want to look at the other side too. We discussed some of the challenges, but what are some of some of your favorite things about, representing District 2 and representing Portland in the city council?
I've had some great conversations with people that didn't like me and then liked me. I think it's tough because I'm like really outspoken. I kind of say my piece. I push people a little bit. And that was always what I wanted to do when being a counselor was, yes, I'm your counselor and I'm your representative. And I'm going to do whatever I can to hear you and support you. But I also like have a background in racial equity, I have a background in advocacy. So like where I'm gonna like push back a little bit on what you would like me to do, especially if what you would like me to do is through like a super privileged lens and viewpoint. So I think the positive of that is I've had people say like, I didn't vote for you and I didn't like you, but then like I heard you on this thing or you explained your point really well on this. And so now I'm coming around. And I think that has been really great because, I think that people are kind of seeing me in a different light than maybe they did before, just based on me being like really consistent, but always open for a dialogue. And then I'm the second Black woman that we've ever elected here in Portland. And so like that means a lot to me when I talk to younger Black people, especially students who are super excited to just see a counselor that doesn't look like what they think a counselor looks like in their head. Like I show up to meetings with like my Black Panther shirt on, I have like my nails done, I always have my hoops in. I'm just kind of like, here I am at this meeting and I'm always going to kind of be authentically me. And I think I am changing what leadership looks like a little bit, and like this new generation of leadership we're seeing across the country, which are younger people of color, people who are LGBTQ plus, and people who are unapologetically showing up and saying, I have something to say, and no, I didn't grow up in the family of politics, and no, I'm not at retirement age, but I know I deserve to be in this room. And I think that has been some really positive parts of being an elected official here. Is I feel like when I'm out and about, people are always like, oh my gosh, Victoria, thanks for everything you do, I love you. I was at like a drag show on the island for Pride last week and I got so much love, and I just really appreciate those moments, because the people who have never felt like they've had a representative that they align with finally have one that they align with, and they see me out at like the bars or at restaurants, and that feels really good too. So I know that I'm making a difference to what leadership looks like here, and that feels like really significant for me.
And as we start to wrap this up, I wonder, we're down in Texas. Most of my listeners are in Texas. If there's maybe one thing you could recommend us, that if any of us come to Maine, one thing that we have to do while we're up there in Portland, Maine.
This is really hard because I will say, even though our weather's been terrible, between June and end of September is the best time to be in Portland. Go find a place to sit on the water. We have 1 million restaurants. We have the most breweries per capita of any city. So like find a place to sit outside on a picnic table by the water, have some lobster, have like a nice beer, listen to live music. There's just so much going on. And as much as it might be exciting to like, and it is, go see like the nature, like leave Portland and go do all of that, but spend like 48 hours in Portland, go see a show at the State Theater, go have dinner somewhere on Congress Street, wander around. This is a safe city. This is a city that is super vibrant, super artsy. And it's just really, it's nice and it's welcoming and it's growing and it's diversifying. And I think because of that, this is why I love living here so much. So yeah, I would have to like send a list of specifics, but find a place to sit by the water, have a lobster roll, listen to live music, and have a good drink, and just soak up how good it smells here, how clean the air is, and how nice the people are.
And as a final question, I can see that you were voted as the best Instagram in Portland. So my question here is, how can elected officials use Instagram as a tool, to be engaging, be informative, and stay in touch with their constituents?
Oh my gosh, Instagram is everything. I mean, you can show behind the scenes on Instagram in a way that you can't, I think, on a lot of other apps. So I would say use it as much as you can. Post the meetings, post what happened after the meetings, post your thoughts, your hot takes, take polls from people, get input, get feedback. I communicate the most on Instagram with my constituents than through any other platform, because it's quick and it's easy for me to quickly send them a message back or send a link. So I would say if you're not on Instagram as an elected official, get on Instagram, because that's where a huge demographic of your constituents are, who want to be able to DM you. And it's now 2023. We are in a time now where people can DM their counselor, which is huge. So I'm fully embracing Instagram, and with it comes some hard parts as well, of some like messages that aren't great, but for the most part, being accessible is what people want. They want to know what you're doing and what you think. So it's a really quick way to get your opinion out there to thousands of people.
And with that, that's Portland, Maine City Councilor Victoria Pelletier. Councilor Pelletier, thank you so much for joining the program today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.